Yes, they're my students. I'm Ursula. I am an ESL teacher and was an ESL learner as well. And what you're going to hear is my story.
I was born and raised in China and immigrated to Canada 4 years ago. And here in Vancouver, it's like my second hometown. Currently, I am a MEd student in LLED department at UBC. I have been teaching English for more than 10 years, both in EFL setting like China, as well as ESL setting here in Vancouver. I used to teach standardized tests for academic or immigration purpose, such as the IELTS, TOEFL, CELPIP, and now I am working as an ESL teacher. My students are from different countries with different backgrounds. I grew up in a Christian community in China. Most of my earliest memories about English were of Christian churches and worships, of songs, sermons, sacraments, even though I couldn't fully understand them. But I felt excited by recognizing more and more words from the English Bible, as I was gradually inspired by living in a community of believers, and their faith to God and their righteousness acts to people were very impressive. I joined the Bible learning group every Sunday. I was taught the discipline of daily devotion and required to read and store the Bible scriptures in my heart by memorization. But I was too young to understand what I read and wrote. I can't trace back all the specific details of how I acquired my L2, but my memory of the formal instructions on writing were mainly focused on memorization of words and phrases or translating from my L1. I still remembered that my teachers and my parents kept telling me, if you can recite 300 ancient poems from the Tang Dynasty, you will be able to write a poem by yourself. In high school, apart from doing the similar mechanical exercises, such as copying and reciting useful phrases from the textbooks, most of the other writing assignments were grammar-based approaches, emphasizing using the correct grammar and vocabulary. And there were no specific instruction on structure and organization of a composition, so I either followed the Chinese way of writing in English or literal translating from a Chinese composition. I still remembered some funny examples of Chinglish translation we did in high school. For example, men's washroom for the disabled was translated into deformed man toilet. Toxic waste was translated into poisonous and evil rubbish. And watch your steps was translated into sleep and fell down carefully. The reason for this kind of terrible translation was because of the semantic and syntactic differences between English and Chinese. I didn't realize that the use of literal translation would lead to such a negative influence on my writing. Compared with high school, university study was more diversified and English learning resources were also abundant. I think the integrative motivation of language socialization, such as making friends, was the major reason for my English progress. For my writing skills, I subconsciously and passively learned how to write a so-called good composition with fancy words and complex grammar structures. I just piled lots of difficult words and combined several short sentences into a long one. However, by using this method, I passed all the university level tests such as CET4 or CET6 with a relatively high score on writing. So I used the same writing method to take the international tests such as the IELTS. even though I got full mark for the reading and listening part. But just like many other students in China, I failed to get a high score in the academic writing part. I realized that the 4-year classroom instruction in college was still not enough to develop substantial skills in English, and failed to construct useful writing skills as well. Writing, as I remembered, there was no special or professional training for this course, and what I learned about writing must have had some problems. After graduation, I worked as a language teacher to teach different types of standardized tests in China. Soon I became one of the most popular teachers with the highest percentage of students passing the tests. Because I was really good at finding shortcuts for tests by teaching reading and listening strategies. Surprisingly, I found most of my students failed the test due to the poor performance in writing part. Even though I wanted to help them, I had no confidence at all in writing. Because to be an eligible IELTS writing teacher, the requirement from our school was to get 8.0 out of 9.0, which was also not an easy task for a native speaker. As I believed teaching and learning were a reciprocal process, I started to explore how to get a higher score in IELTS academic writing task. I followed some writing bloggers, as well as the best IELTS writing teachers online, and also read the sample answers of the writing test again and again. Instead of only correcting students' grammar mistakes and overemphasis on lexical range, I realized that the structure and organization of the essay should be paid more attention. The task response was more important than memorizing the formula or templates, but it was taught by many teachers. When a large number of students sitting for a test, they didn't even know the specific topic of the writing pieces, but busy with writing down what they memorized from the previous class. Another commonality of their writing was that instead of expanding on the topic sentence, they listed many bullet points without giving explanation and detailed supporting ideas. Since then, I knew how to write and teach for tests, but still had no idea about what was L2 writing in a broader sense. After several years of teaching, I decided to step out of my comfort zone and start global traveling, and finally ended up settling down here in Vancouver.
'Cause fossil fuels keep paying you, doesn't weigh on you at all. Some of us were sent back to do the work again because this is our way.
The Western education was in a stark contrast with the education I received in China. For academic writing, I learned how to develop an argument, find a conceptual framework, think analytically, and etc. Gradually, I developed my own learning autonomy and critical awareness ideology on language learning and teaching. The learning experience was quite enlightening as it took me out of myself and into a different mindset with different cultures and values. However, wrestling with unfamiliar ideas could not only help clarify my own thinking, but also help show up my blind spots in a way that we might have been looking at the world. Now I'm working in an ESL setting, which I found it's quite different from the EFL one. I pay more attention to provide as much as comprehensible input and cultivate students' creative and critical thinking in writing. When I start to reflect on my teaching and learning of L2 writing in different contexts, in EFL or ESL setting, different approaches, teacher-centered or student-centered, I found that they all have advantages to draw on. As an international student, a language teacher, an immigrant, I have a conflicted identity as well as a bunch of questions. When I look back, I believe what I learned and experienced will have a positive impact on what I teach. I believe there were much more to learn compared with the richness of the world has to offer.